At a time when many nations are bending to US pressure, one small country in Africa decided to push back. Chad, a landlocked nation in the heart of the Sahel, often labeled one of the poorest regions on Earth. But this month, Chad made headlines not for poverty, but for power. In a move that shocked international observers, Chad officially closed its borders to US citizens. No negotiation, no backpedaling, just a clear message. If you ban us, we'll ban you too. This was Chad's direct response to the US president's updated travel ban, one that once again grouped several African countries under vague security justifications. But unlike others, Chad didn't issue a press release or send diplomats behind closed doors. Chad responded with action. And that's why we need to talk about it. Because while many African countries remain silent in the face of Western sanctions and double standards, Chad just flipped the script. So the question is, how did this small, often overlooked country find the courage to stand up to a global superpower? What made Chad so bold? Let's find out. During his first term in office, President Donald Trump made his stance on Africa painfully clear. Indifference at best, disdain at worst. Now, in his second term, not much has changed. From suspending foreign aid to slapping tariffs on African exports and tightening immigration rules, Trump's policies have repeatedly signaled one thing: Africa is not a priority. And so, his latest move came as no surprise to those paying attention. Earlier this month, the US administration revived one of its most controversial policies, the visa ban. 12 countries were hit with the ban, including Chad, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Eritrea, Somalia, the Republic of Congo, and more. The justification? According to Trump, these countries have deficient screening and vetting processes and often refuse to take back their own citizens who overstay their visas in the US. But the timing raised eyebrows. The announcement followed a disturbing attack in Boulder, Colorado. 12 people were injured when a man unleashed chaos on a gathering in support of Israeli hostages, armed with a makeshift flamethrower, Molotov cocktails, and other incendiary weapons. The FBI labeled it a suspected terror attack. Trump quickly linked the incident to the visa policy. In a video posted on his Truth Social platform, he said the attack underscored the extreme dangers of allowing foreign nationals into the US without proper vetting. But here's where things take a turn. Because while most African countries responded with silence, Chad didn't. It pushed back. And that's what makes this story different. Now, while some US Democrats have condemned the move, others have supported it. In support of Trump's moves, one congressman said that travel to the US was a privilege, not a right. Well, in response, Chad decided to also make it known that travel to Chad is also a privilege and not a right. In a Facebook post, the president of Chad stated that he is directing his government to suspend visas to US citizens in accordance with the principles of reciprocity. Simply put, since the US has banned Chadian travels, Chad has decided to do the same. But there is something striking we want to pick out from the president's post. He wrote, "Chad has neither planes to offer nor billions of dollars to give, but Chad has its dignity and pride." What a bold and patriotic statement. It sent chills down our spines when we first heard it. Indeed, President Traoré has rubbed off on the Chadian president, because this is clearly something that Traoré would say. All around the world, most countries cower before the US. When the US makes a certain decision, such as when Trump was imposing tariffs right, left, and center, most countries were quick to run to Washington to negotiate. It's only a few countries such as China and Russia that have had the balls to stand their ground against the US. Even countries in the Middle East that used to have fearsome reputations have also chosen to be on the side of the US. Qatar, for instance, offered Trump a $400 million luxury plane as a way of showing that it has chosen to side with the US. This was the very incident the president of Chad referred to in his bold and defiant statement. In a powerful message to his people and the world, he wrote, "Chad doesn't have planes. Chad doesn't have billions to give. But what we do have is pride and dignity." Strong words from a strong leader, and words that stood in stark contrast to the responses of other African governments affected by the US travel ban. Take the Republic of Congo, for example. Instead of pushing back, their government spokesperson, Thierry Mungala, took to the press with an astonishingly weak response. He claimed Congo's inclusion in the travel ban was simply a misunderstanding, that U.S. authorities had mistaken the attackers in the Colorado incident as Congolese nationals. Obviously, Congo is not a terrorist country, he said, before adding that diplomatic services would be in touch with Washington to clarify things. But here's the problem. That narrative wasn't just weak, it was false. The attacker in Boulder, Colorado was reportedly an Egyptian national, yet Egypt wasn't included in the travel ban. So no, it wasn't a case of mistaken identity. And no, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. The ban was deliberate, calculated, political. And instead of acknowledging that reality, Congo's leadership chose appeasement. They hoped diplomacy would fix what pride should have challenged. But Chad took a different path. It chose to defend its dignity, even if it meant going head-to-head with the United States. And that's exactly why, days after the ban was announced, the Republic of Congo remains on the list. No response, no reversal, just silence from Washington. But here's what's even more concerning. Rumors are spreading that the list may soon grow. Reports suggest that the Trump administration is considering adding even more African countries to the travel ban. The potential list reads like a who's who of U.S. allies on the continent: Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Egypt, Gabon, Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, Malawi, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, São Tomé and Príncipe, Senegal, South Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe. These aren't anti-American states. Most of these countries are pro-US. Their presidents and diplomats have long cooperated with Washington, signing defense deals, attending summits, and following policy cues. But none of that seems to matter. Because for Trump, and let's be honest, for many before him, the only thing that matters is America's interest. And yet, some African leaders still don't get it. Just recently, Sierra Leone made a public statement saying they look forward to working with the United States to ensure progress. Progress? With a country that doesn't even respect you? It's more than naive. It's humiliating. How can you work with a partner who doesn't see you as an equal, who puts you on a blacklist without warning and without accountability? And so, we're forced to ask, what's the issue with African leadership? Is it fear? Is it dependency? Or is it simply a refusal to confront uncomfortable truths? Because if countries like Chad can take a stand, why can't others? Why do so many African leaders still bow when they should be demanding respect? And this is exactly why we applaud the bold actions of Chad's current president, who declared that while Chad may not have billions, it has something more valuable: dignity and self-respect. Because here's what makes this moment even more remarkable. Chad wasn't always this assertive. Under its former president, the late Idriss Déby, Chad was widely seen as a puppet of foreign powers. It was a close ally of both France and the United States. French troops were stationed in N'Djamena. The US had its own military presence on Chadian soil. For years, the country was a key node in Western military strategy across the Sahel. But then the ground shifted. Coups erupted. Alliances crumbled. And the geopolitical landscape of the Sahel changed. Anti-French, anti-Western sentiment swept through Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and slowly, it reached Chad. At first, Chad watched, but then it acted. After Niger expelled US troops, Chad followed suit, demanding new terms for military cooperation. The message was clear: no more one-sided partnerships. The US was forced to withdraw its troops for nearly 5 months. Only after Chad laid down its own conditions did negotiations resume. And this time, it wasn't Washington dictating the terms. As one US official put it, America would not be returning to Chad with the same footprint as before. Instead, any future cooperation would be aligned with Chad's goals, Chad's interests, Chad's sovereignty. That is what real assertion looks like. As the Chadian president reminded the world, just as the United States defends its interests unapologetically, Chad will do the same. Because sovereignty is not reserved for the powerful. It is a right of all nations, big or small, rich or poor. And Chad has chosen to claim it. So the real question is, why can't more African leaders follow the example of Chad? Why do so many continue to pander to the West acting as if survival depends on submission. Maybe it's not ignorance, maybe it's fear. Fear born out of decades of domination. Fear of retaliation from powerful nations that have long treated Africa as a subordinate, not a partner. Because the truth is, this fear is rooted in history. Most African nations gained independence during the height of Cold War tensions, when global politics were defined by the West versus Soviet Union dichotomy. And while the Soviets often backed African liberation movements, it was the West that ultimately won the narrative war. It was the West that imposed the economic structures, the military partnerships, and the diplomatic playbook. And so, African leaders were forced to take up the label of non-aligned, a clever term for political caution in a world where the wrong choice could mean sanctions, coups, or worse. But let's not pretend the rules were ever fair. Each US president, from Bush to Trump, has repeated the same doctrine in different words. You're either with us or against us. This has become the core of American foreign policy. Obedience is rewarded, defiance is punished. And this is what so many African leaders fear, not because they're weak, but because for decades, the system has conditioned them to believe that resistance comes at too high a price. But now, the world is changing. A new generation of African leaders, like those in the Sahel, are beginning to realize something important, that respect is not given to the obedient. It's earned by the assertive. Chad is proving that even without billions, a nation can still possess dignity and demand it from others. For decades, many African leaders, both past and present, have ruled under one dangerous assumption, that the success of their governments depends on how the West perceives them. Pro-West or anti-West, loyal or defiant. That binary has defined the fate of too many African administrations. To be pro-West means more than just diplomatic ties. It means using the West as the measuring stick. It means reshaping national policies to suit foreign agendas. It means treating Western approval as the ultimate badge of legitimacy. We've seen this play out time and again. Take Kenya's President William Ruto. Once hailed as a champion of Pan-Africanism, Ruto has since pivoted hard toward Western interests. His policies, partnerships, and rhetoric now align almost entirely with the goals of Washington and Brussels. So much so that the former US administration called him a strong ally of the West. But here's the reality. Pro-West African leaders often govern under Western patronage, pledging loyalty not to their people, but to the foreign powers who promise aid, loans, and diplomatic favor. And for the West, loyalty is everything. As long as an African leader remains obedient, corruption, repression, even human rights abuses are quietly overlooked. Because in the eyes of the West, it's better to have a brutal but loyal partner than an independent leader with a vision for African self-reliance. Just look at Muammar Gaddafi. He was demonized not because he was cruel, but because he dared to dream of a united, self-sufficient Africa. He was defiant. He challenged Western dominance, and for that, he paid the ultimate price. Muammar Gaddafi was far from perfect, but to the people of Libya, he was a leader who prioritized national development, stability, and independence from foreign control. But because he stood tall against the West, refusing to bow, refusing to allow Libya's wealth to be siphoned abroad, he was branded a villain. The Western media machine painted him as a tyrant, and tragically, that narrative worked. The West succeeded, not just in discrediting him, but in ending his life. His death wasn't just the fall of a leader, it was a message, a warning. And perhaps that's exactly what today's pro-West African leaders have internalized, that defiance comes with consequences, that resisting the West means risking everything. But here's the bitter truth. Colonialism may have officially ended, but the power structures remain intact. Yes, decolonization freed African nations from being direct colonies, but it didn't free them from the grip of Western influence. Political sovereignty was granted, but economic exploitation never left. The strings were simply hidden deeper, embedded in foreign aid, multinational deals, military partnerships, and political interference. That's why so many African governments today remain pro-West, especially pro-United States. Not because it was a choice made freely, but because history left them no real alternatives. After independence, the West, and especially the US, didn't step back. Instead, they stepped in. Using covert operations, economic pressure, and complicit African collaborators, They helped overthrow visionary leaders who dared to chart an independent path. Leaders like Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. These men had a Pan-African dream, but that dream threatened the old order, and so they were removed, one by one. In their place, the West propped up compliant rulers. Their only job? To keep the Soviets out, and the Western corporations in. To be embraced by the West, African leaders have long been required to reject political ideologies rooted in the people, especially those perceived as Marxist or Pan-African. That's the price of entry into the club of Western allies. And once inside, they're spared the labels: despot, dictator, autocrat, corrupt. Those terms are reserved for the defiant ones, the ones who speak up, the ones who dare to challenge the global order. But let's be honest, being pro-West has never been Africa's path to prosperity. For all the promises, partnerships, and glowing speeches, what has the West really delivered? African nations loyal to the West remain locked in cycles of debt, dependency, and underdevelopment. Each new partnership brings unequal terms, and each agreement tilts the scale further out of balance. The West takes, Africa gives, and the people remain stuck. Because for the West, this has never been about mutual benefit. It's about control, influence, access to resources, and the preservation of an old power structure where Africa is seen, but never heard. This is why African leaders must change course. They must become assertive, decisive, proud. Because the tendency to bow before superpowers, especially the United States, erodes everything a sovereign nation stands for. It strips away independence, dignity, vision. But not all leaders cowered. When the US criticized Nelson Mandela for honoring Muammar Gaddafi, a man the West had branded a villain, Mandela didn't apologize. He stood his ground. He said clearly, "The United States has no right to tell me who my friends should be." That is what assertive leadership looks like. And until more African leaders find that courage, the continent will remain at the mercy of powers that have never truly had its best interests at heart. For far too long, the United States has grown arrogant, believing it has the authority to dictate who African nations can or cannot partner with. We saw it recently in Niger, when US military officials blatantly told the Nigerian government to cut ties with Russia and Iran. The message was clear: obedience or consequences. But Niger didn't flinch. In an act of true sovereignty, Niger responded the way any proud nation should. It sent the Americans packing. No long debates. No compromises. The decision was swift and final. And just like that, the US lost its most expensive military base in West Africa. So what happened afterward? Did the sky fall? Did Niger collapse? Absolutely nothing. Because when a leader stands firm on principle, when he defends his nation's right to choose, other powers have no option but to respect it. One of the best examples of that kind of leadership today is President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. While often criticized by Western media, Kagame remains a respected figure at home and across much of the continent for his focus on national development and independence. He has refused to blindly follow the West and instead advocates for partnerships that are balanced and dignified. And because of that, he's labeled dictatorial. But Kagame's position has always been clear. He believes in cooperation, with the West, yes, but not under Western patronage. He does not accept the idea that African nations should be told what to do, how to govern, or whom to befriend. As Kagame himself said, "The time for dictating to Africans what they should do or be is up. Now is the time for better conversations and partnerships that can mutually benefit the West and the continent in a more respectable manner." That's not extremism, that's sovereignty. And Africa needs more leaders who speak like that, who lead like that, who refuse to be told who their friends should be. Because dignity is not granted by foreign powers. It is declared and defended by the people themselves. President Paul Kagame once captured the essence of the Pan-African vision with words that still resonate across the continent. "What I am looking for is modern Africanization, not Westernization. I want to be an African, a modern one. An African that can relate meaningfully to the rest of the world. Not an African lost in the jungle looking for gracious people to give me a sense of direction." That statement isn't just a quote, It's a blueprint, a mindset. And it's the same spirit we see today in leaders like the President of Chad, leaders who are choosing dignity over dependency, sovereignty over submission. This is the direction Africa must follow. Not isolation, not hostility, but strength, clarity, partnership on Africa's terms. So, what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you believe Africa deserves better, like this video, drop a comment and subscribe to our channel for more content that challenges the narrative and defends African dignity.